Hey everyone! Welcome to the Easy English Book Club. My name is Anastasia and today we're going to continue reading Dracula, originally written by Bram Stoker. I changed the text of this book a little bit just to make it easier to understand. I did not make it shorter and I did not change the ideas of Bram Stoker. We're still in chapter 1, but this is part 2. So let's begin. Part 2. The 4th of May. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count directing him to book the best place on the coach for me. But when I started asking more questions, he didn't want to answer and pretended that he could not understand my German. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly. At least he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He said that the money had been sent in a letter and that was all he knew. When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula and could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife made a sign of the cross, saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. It was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, because it was all very mysterious and not at all comforting. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way, "Must you go? Oh, young her, must you go?" She was so worried that she seemed to have forgotten what German she knew, and mixed it all up with some other language which I did not know at all. I was just able to understand her by asking many questions. When I told her that I must go at once and that I was on an important business trip, she asked again, "Do you know what day it is?" I answered that it was the 4th of May. She shook her head and said again, "Oh yes, I know that, but do you know what day it is?" On my saying that I did not understand, she went on, "It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full power? Do you know where you're going and what you're going to?" It was so obvious that she was greatly worried that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and asked me not to go, at least to wait a day or two before starting. It was all very funny, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to stop me. And so I tried to raise her up and said as seriously as I could that I thanked her, but my duty was more important than anything and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes and, taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I did not know what to do because, as a member of the Church of England, I have been taught to think of such things as idols, and yet it seemed so impolite to say no to an old lady who had such good intentions and so very much worried about me. She saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, because she put the rosary around my neck and said, "For your mother's sake," and went out of the room. I'm writing up this part of the diary while I'm waiting for the coach, which is of course late, and the crucifix is still around my neck. Is it the old lady's fear, or the many ghostly stories believed in this place, or the crucifix itself? I do not know, but I am not feeling nearly as calm as usual. If these notes should ever reach Mina before my return, let them bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. The 5th of May. The castle. The grey morning is over, and the sun is high over the faraway horizon, which seemed rough with a lot of pointed trees or hills. It is so far off that big things and little are mixed. I'm not sleepy, and as I asked not to disturb me until I wake up, naturally I write till sleep comes. There are many things, many odd things to write down, and in order not to let anyone who reads them think that they are the result of the dinner I had before I left Bistritz, let me put down my dinner exactly. I dined on what they called robber steak, bits of bacon, onion and beef seasoned with red pepper and roasted over the fire on sticks in the simple style of the London's cat meat. The wine was golden Mediash. It tastes a little unusual at first, but it is quite pleasant. I had only a couple of glasses of this and nothing else. When I got on the coach, the driver had not taken his seat and I saw him talking with the landlady. I understood that they were talking of me, because every now and then they looked at me, and some of people who were sitting on the bench outside the door came and listened and then looked at me. Most of them pityingly. I could hear a lot of words often repeated, foreign words, because there were many nationalities in the crowd. So I quietly got my polyglot dictionary from my bag and looked them up. I must say they did not make me feel good, because among them were Ordog, Satan, Pakal, Hell, Strigoitsa, witch, Vrolak and Bulkoslak, both of which mean the same thing, one being Slovak and the other Serbian, for something that is either werewolf or vampire. I must ask the Count all about these superstitions. When we started, the crowd round the inn door, which had by this time become rather large, all made the sign of the cross and pointed two fingers towards me. With some difficulty, I got a fellow passenger to tell me what they meant. He didn't want to answer at first, but when he found out that I was English, he explained that it was to guard me against the evil eye. This was not very pleasant for me, just beginning my journey to an unknown place to meet an unknown man, but everyone seemed so kind-hearted and so sorrowful and so sympathetic that I could not but be touched. I shall never forget the last glimpse which I had of the inn-yard and its crowd of figures resembling a picture, all crossing themselves as they stood round the wide archway, with its background of oleander and orange trees in green tubs in the center of the yard. Then our driver, whose wide linen pants covered the whole front of his seat, Gotza they call them, cracked his big whip over his 4 small horses, which all ran next to each other, and we set off on our journey. I soon forgot all ghostly fears because of the beauty of the places we were driving by, although if I had known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to forget about them so easily. Before us lay a green land full of forests and woods. Here and there were steep hills crowned with trees or with farmhouses. There was everywhere a surprising number of blossoming fruit trees, apple, plum, pear, cherry, and as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees covered with the fallen petals. In and out among these green hills of what they call here the Mittelland ran the road, losing itself as it went round the grassy curve, or was hidden by the ends of pine trees growing in all directions. The road was rough, but still we seemed to fly over it with a surprising speed. I could not understand then why we were in such a hurry, but the driver had obviously decided to reach Borgo Pass as soon as we possibly could. I was told that this road is in excellent condition in summer, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. In this respect, it is different from most other roads in the Carpathians, because it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. In the old days, the hospodars would not repair them, or the Turks could start thinking that they were preparing to bring in a foreign army, and so start the war, which was always hanging over them. Beyond the green hills of the Middle Land rose large and impressive slopes of forest up to the tall and steep hills, the Carpathians themselves. Right and left of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them, and helping us see all the wonderful colors of this beautiful mountain range, deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peaks, green and brown where grass and rock met, and an endless perspective of rocks with sharp and pointed edges. Here and there we saw waterfalls. One of my companions touched my arm as we went round the base of a hill and saw the high snow-covered mountain which seemed to be right before us. "Look, isn't that God's seat?" and he crossed himself with great feeling. As we went up and up in circles, and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to appear all around us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountain top was still lit by the sunset and seemed to glow out with a cool pink. Here and there we passed Czechs and Slovaks, all in unusual clothes. By the roadside were many crosses, and as we went past them, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman standing on their knees before a holy place, who did not even turn round as we came closer, but seemed so deep in prayer that they did not notice the outer world. There were many things new to me, for instance hay, stored for a time in the trees, and here and there very beautiful birch trees, with white stems shining like silver and delicate green leaves. Now and again we passed peasants' carts built specially for these rough roads. On them usually was a group of peasants. In the evening it began to get very cold, dark and misty as we came up the pass, and the trees were dark against the snow. Sometimes when we were going through the pine woods, dark, grey and solemn, my thoughts returned to frightening thoughts that came to me earlier in the evening. Then the falling sunset added ghost-like clouds to the scene, which moved through the valleys without stopping. Sometimes the mountain road was so difficult that even though our driver was in a hurry, the horses could only go slowly. I wanted to get down and walk a little to help the horses, as we do at home, but the driver said no. "You must not walk here," he said. "The dogs are too aggressive." And then he added a joke. I knew it was a joke because he looked around to catch the smile of the rest. "I think you will have enough of such things before you go to sleep." And then we continued our journey in a hurry, and the only stop the driver made was a short pause to light his lamps. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement among the passengers, and they all spoke to the driver, one after the other, as though asking him to go even faster. He hit the horses unmercifully with his long whip and shouted at them wildly. Then, through the darkness, I could see a sort of patch of grey light ahead of us, as though there was an opening in the hills. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. The crazy coach rocked from side to side like a boat on a stormy sea. I had to hold on. The road became better, and we almost flew along. Then the mountains seemed to come near to us on each side and to look down upon us. We were entering on the Borgo Pass. One by one, several of the passengers offered me gifts and made me accept them. These were certainly all strange and different, but each was given in simple good faith, with kind words and a blessing, and those strange gestures showing fear, which I had seen outside the hotel at Bistritz, the sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye. Then, as we flew along, the driver leaned forward, and on each side the passengers, stretching over the edge of the coach, looked eagerly into the darkness. It was obvious that something very exciting was either happening or expected, but though I asked each passenger, no one would give me the smallest explanation. This state of excitement continued for some little time, and at last we saw before us the pass opening out on the eastern side. There were dark clouds overhead, and in the air the heavy sense of thunder. It seemed as though the mountain range had separated two atmospheres, and that now we had got into the thunderous one. I was now myself looking out for the vehicle which was going to take me to the Count. Each moment I expected to see the light of lamps through the blackness, but all was dark. The only light was coming from our own lamps, in which the steam from our hard-driven horses rose in a white cloud. We could see now the sandy road lying white before us, but there was on it no sign of a vehicle. The passengers returned to their seats with a sigh of gladness, which seemed to make fun of my own disappointment. I was already thinking what to do when the driver, looking at his watch, said to the other something which I could hardly hear. It was spoken so quietly and in such a low tone. I thought it was an hour less than the time. Then turning to me, he said in German worse than my own, "There is no carriage here. The Herr is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina and return tomorrow or the next day, better the next day." While he was speaking, the horses began to neigh, showing their fear, so that the driver had to hold them up. Then, among screams from the peasants and a universal crossing of themselves, a calash with 4 horses drove up behind us, overtook us, and stopped beside the coach. I could see in the light of our lamps that the horses were coal black and splendid animals. They were driven by a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight, as he turned to us. He said to the driver, "You're early tonight, my friend." The man stammered in reply, "The Herr Englishman was in a hurry." To which the stranger replied, "That is why, I suppose, you wished him to go on to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are fast." As he spoke, he smiled, and the lamplight fell on a hard-looking mouth, with very red lips and sharp-looking teeth, as white as ivory. One of my companions whispered to another the line from Burger's Lenore, "For the dead travel fast." The strange driver obviously heard the words because he looked up with a big smile. The passenger turned his face away, at the same time putting out his 2 fingers and crossing himself. "Give me the hare's luggage," said the driver, and my bags were handed out and put in the calash very fast. Then I came down from the side of the coach as the calash was close alongside, the driver helping me with a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel. His strength must have been great indeed. Without a word, he made the horses turn, and we quickly disappeared into the darkness of the pass. When I looked back, I saw the steam from the horses of the coach by the light of the lamps, and the figures of my former fellow passengers crossing themselves. Then the driver cracked his whip and called to his horses, and off they went on their way to Bukovina. This is the end of part 2. Thank you very much for reading it with me. Subscribe to read even more, and I'll see you in part 3. Bye!